We're back with an original show.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, it's funny, we take some summertime production breaks for this program where we will have run interesting programs from programs past for a week or so. It'll happen a couple more times during the summer. And what's interesting about it is I'll be running around the community and somebody stop me and say, hey, I love that show last night. And I great. What was it? Because I forget, because they're highlight shows, or some would say best of, which is a term I think is a misnomer, or reruns as we used to call them in the business. But we're back with a live. Well, we're never live. We tape in the early afternoon, but this is your Wednesday show, and we are post North Korea, and we can talk about those things. And my friend, sociologist and political professor from Brown University, Michael Kennedy, is here to share his thoughts, which are always compelling. So welcome aboard. Thanks for checking in, and thanks for watching all those reruns and letting me know about it. Just a couple of things to catch up on locally. Today we've got this endorsement scandal crisis. I don't know. The headline, John Lewis, the elder statesman of Congress in many ways, civil rights leader, is caught in the middle between Gina Raimondo, our governor, and Matt Brown, our Secretary of State. Seems that, I don't know, listen, the campaign part of Raimondo's team is pretty good. No, they're pretty good. They raise a ton of money, and they are mercenaries. So they must have learned that Matt Brown had a friendly relationship with John Lewis and went ahead and stole the endorsement, according to Matt Brown, because John Lewis recently endorsed Governor Raimondo for governor. Reportedly, David Cicilline, the congressman, kind of worked on the governor's behalf for that. Matt Brown turns up, says, John Lewis is a great personal friend of mine. I go, what? So Ted Nisi from Channel 12 here contacts John Lewis to check in on the endorsement, and John Lewis says, well, I didn't know that Matt Brown was running. If Matt Brown was running, I'd be with Matt Brown. So, well, does that mean you're not endorsing Gina Raimondo? Well, no, I can't say I'm withdrawing my endorsement, but if I knew that Matt Brown was in the race, I'd endorse him. So what does that mean? It means that endorsements are garbage anyway. Okay, because they're just transactional deals that are made that have very little to do usually with personal relationships and actual true belief about, let's put it this way, most of them are garbage. So have fun with that one, but it's a real political tempest in a teapot today. In the meantime, a couple of things I wanted to catch up on with the truckers. This headline yesterday in the Providence Journal just cracked me up. Truckers' threat to file lawsuit may be empty. I think the Providence Journal has a bug up its wazoo over the truckers. The Rhode Island Trucking Association and the American Trucking Association are poised to litigate against the state of Rhode Island, the DOT, the governor, and everybody else for those machines that you just saw that are now active. We now have 2 South County tolls. Now, the plan is to have 14 to 17 tolls. Now, why it's 14 to 17 is still beyond me. At this juncture, you'd think we know exactly how many tolls are supposed to go up. And this whole rigged deal for the tolls is delayed again. I mean, the 2 that just went up have been delayed. The 12 or 14 more that are coming are now in 2019. Gee, isn't it funny? They're not coming before the November election. Gee, I wonder why. Now, most of you are asleep at the switch over this whole thing because you've been told they're for the trucks. The technology, by the way, is as simple as a decoder saying, oh, that's a car, 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 that's a truck, that's a car, that's a car, that's a car, that's a truck, that's a truck, that's a truck, that's a car, that's a car, that's a car, that's a car. Okay? When the revenues don't match the overemphasized projections that DOT has, when they're not nearly half what the DOT thinks it is, guess what's going to happen? There'll be a piece of legislation that will be put in saying, well, we're not going to take down all these gantries. And so the machine's going to go, that's a car, that's a car, that's a car, bill 'em. That's a car, that's a car, that's a car, bill 'em. That's what's going to happen. So if there end up being 12 more, you know, one way or the other, two things are going to happen. We're either going to have a discrimination lawsuit from the truckers, and they'll do that on their own time, which they may win because they're the only organization of trucks in America that are being identified this way. And the other part of this whole thing is that if this truck-only toll system prevails here, it'll be all over the country. So they're going to fight it. But the revenue projections are so bad on this whole thing, so inaccurate, that inevitably, with all the gantries up, they're going to end up having to do that switch that says, that's a car, that's a car, that's a car, bill it. So if you don't start yelling now, don't come crying to me in 2020, 2021 when it's a car, it's a car, it's a car. You're going down Middle Spring Avenue or across Middle Spring Avenue and they toll you for crossing that bridge. And you say, what bridge? Ask the DOT. They call it a bridge. All right, North Korea in the minds of everybody here. Here's a headline that just makes me feel so comfortable. North Korea is no longer a nuclear threat. Well, I'm glad that's over. Here's the latest update.
President Trump arrived home this morning following his whirlwind summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He tweeted, "Everybody can now feel much safer than the day I took office." And he added, "There is no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea." The president and Kim signed a joint statement in Singapore promising the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. The agreement had no mention of verification, a timeline, or North Korea's human rights abuses.
This president wants North Korea to completely denuclearize. So obviously that has to be complete, verifiable, and irreversible. That will take a while.
The president says he wants Congress to approve a final deal, but it could be a tough sell on Capitol Hill.
All Americans are entering into this discourse with eyes wide open.
Chairman Kim did not even mention his ambiguous comment to denuclearize when he returned home to North Korea. It was absent.
In North Korea, the summit is being called historic, and there's much focus on President Trump's decision to end joint U.S.-South Korean military exercises.
We'll be saving a tremendous amount of money. Plus, I think it's very provocative.
The president's surprise announcement to end what he called war games caught senior Pentagon officials and the South Koreans off guard. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is scheduled to meet with the leaders of South Korea and China on Thursday.
The first senator there, Professor Kennedy, is Senator Kennedy, and he said that Americans are going into this thing with eyes wide open. I'm not so sure. You're the sociologist. What do you think?
Well, which Americans are going in with their eyes wide open, right? We have so much expertise about negotiating with North Korea, on which President Trump is not drawing. So their eyes are wide open, but in disbelief. We have, I would say, the bulk of America who doesn't pay attention to this. But then there's a third segment, those people who have helped elect all of these Trump supporters in yesterday's elections, who are saying, look, here's proof that Trump is a successful entrepreneur, because this is, in the end, less a negotiation than it is a replay of his reality show.
Okay.
See, you're a tough act to follow. I had to figure out somehow to.
No, but no, I'm on the radio yesterday, and predictably, I tried to do this. I'm not going to say nothing. Just call me and let me know what you think about this. Of course, I couldn't. I have to run the show, so I burp out some thoughts. But it was the string of, oh my gosh, this is incredible. What a success story. Blah blah blah. When are you going to get it through your head, Dan? Da da blah blah da 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 da. And a few folks even try to assert that it was a coup that the president was able to hook up with Kim Jong-un. This marketing that he's done has been, in some ways, historically brilliant. He's actually convinced some people in America that it was hard for us to get to Kim Jong-un if we wanted to.
Right.
Right?
So there are two brilliant things in this maneuver. One is, just as you said, I mean, if an American president would have been willing to meet with a North Korean president before,
any day
it
of the
would
week.
have happened like that.
Sure.
But most presidents held this dictator and previous dictators at such an arm's length that they wouldn't want to sully having the American flag and the North Korean flag next to each other. So that's point number one. But point number two, I will give Trump credit. He has made progress from December to now. He's not threatening to bomb North Korea. And I think that is improvement, A. And B,
that's self-improvement.
well, but given that he's representing our nation, that is self-improvement, especially in comparison to most of the other things he's done recently. But secondly, I think one of the other things that I do give him credit for is that if he has this personal rapport, if he has the right team around him, if he has his allies backing him up in South Korea and Japan, if he can follow through, which I know he can in golf, but I don't know if he can in politics. If he can follow through, then this was a good move. But it's too early to judge it as a success or a failure. The one place where I am worried, as many commentators have marked, is that he has said nothing about human rights. And so this is once again an indication that we are losing our moral leadership in the world if he gets along better with authoritarians than he does with our allies.
Well, the question is, and we'll ask the sociologists when we come out, does America care about that moral compass? Because this seems all transactional to me. We'll be right back.
The president needed to disrupt the status quo, and the president has disrupted the status quo. He should be applauded for doing that. And we should be under no delusion of our experiences with North Korea. It's a terrible regime. They've done terrible things, and they've been deceitful in the past. But it's really important that we disrupted this status quo like the president has.
You know, this notion of disruption has become the whole moniker here. Innately, is disruption innately a productive thing? I think it's all contextual, right?
Oh, that's such a, you're turning into such a great sociologist. Under what conditions is disruption productive, right? In this case, I think Speaker Ryan is right. It was good to disrupt the trajectory toward war. But to disrupt our allies and our trade agreements, to disrupt the constitutional order, those are not so productive, even though they are protective of Donald Trump himself. Because he is the master of distraction. He is the master of saying, things are not so good over here, but look over here. And that kind of disruption is not productive apart from keeping him in office.
What do you take from the summit, practically?
Well, I've been to Singapore quite a few times now, and I say it's a wonderful place to visit. So I'm glad they had it there. I'm glad it was managed so well. That by itself was an accomplishment. That there was nothing blowing up, not literally but metaphorically, that was an accomplishment. And everything hinges upon whether we have the expertise. There was recently a report in the Washington Post, I think, that said that President Trump did not even have expertise on nuclear weapons at his disposal. If we cannot negotiate responsibly unless he has experts around him. And so I would say the first sign of success will be when we restore the State Department to its capacity to negotiate, and that he brings into his inner circle those who have the expertise to help him judge whether we are making progress or not. We can't go on his feel.
Yeah, well, the 1 minute test, it was going to take him a minute to feel like he was doing well. And I was timing the first minute. There wasn't much going on there. You know, they were standing with each other and talking, although he did suggest that he was honored to be with one of the worst killers on the planet.
Yeah.
And I just, that blew my mind. And I didn't need talking heads to influence me by that. I looked at it and said, I cannot believe he just said that. This notion that America has always had a moral foundational compass in this kind of diplomacy seems to have dissipated into thin air. He gets very little criticism, even from those who are criticizing him, about empty promises and no specificity about nuclear, disarmament, any kind of verification, all that kind of stuff. Nobody seems to have burped over the idea that he suggested he was honored to be in the same place with Kim Jong-un. he is as transactional a human being as I've ever seen. Nothing that happened yesterday matters to right now, and what tomorrow brings is something that he will deal with tomorrow. Is America going there too?
So this is why I'm worried about the negotiations, is that negotiations are not transactional. They're building trust over time, and it requires follow-through. So this is why, if he were in charge of this, I would be worried. You know, maybe our new Secretary of State, Pompeo, can handle this, and this would be a great sign of Trump's trust in someone else.
Well, the pomp and circumstance surrounding it, though, you know, with the flags next to each other, and the way they did the whole thing, and the video, by the way, trying to sell Kim Jong-un on the idea that he needs to put a resort up on the beach. The North Koreans are not of that frame of mind. I don't need to be in front of Kim Jong-un to understand that that's barely a motive for their doing business here. I mean, who's kidding who here? Yeah, just who's kidding who here? I don't understand what's going on. But there are people watching on television saying, that's because you're stupid, Dan. This guy's got a brain bigger than anybody can even contemplate. There's a wall of brilliance that I can't get into.
Well, I have to give him credit that he is brilliant in destroying his enemies. And he's even brilliant in pulling down his friends. So one of the things that I would not say is very brilliant is to be on his team. Because the people on his team are now at risk, or the people that were on his team, but maybe even the people in the future. But you're saying he needs a team, and I mean, who can argue that he needs a hell of a team in order to be able to, you know, make this thing work? I don't know, man. This is and speaking of team. Yeah. So there's this guy that runs Canada. You ever heard of him? It's Trudeau. We got a headline there. Only a day and a half before this whole shebang, he, you know, his henchmen are taking this guy out, suggesting that there's a special place in hell for Justin Trudeau, who simply restated after the G7 summit where Canada's discipline wanted to be on tariffs. And Donald Trump more or less came out in the press conference and said, hey, listen, you crossed me. I thought we had, you know, understanding. You know, hey, we got televisions on Air Force One. So now we're going to sock it to him simply because he insulted me. And America just says, yeah, go get him, Mr. President. Except for Bob Corker, of course, who, you know, stood on his head trying to explain that this is absolutely not the way to do business. Crazy. Whose team is on what team? I mean, we have allies that are trying to figure out what team is he building here. So I think what you were suggesting is just right. Trump is not a team player. He's not part of a team. You're on his team if you agree with him on everything he says. And so this is what's so tragic about, I'm blanking on our trade negotiator's name who said that Trudeau should go to hell, right?
But,
you know, what's tragic about this, and actually somehow redeeming, is that this is the first person who has offered something of an apology for what he said, because that was certainly beyond every diplomatic protocol.
He was jacked trying to perform for the president.
Exactly. And so this is the thing that I worry about, is that, you know, you probably know I'm not a Republican, but one of the things that I am worried about is that for America to be democratic, it needs a multi-party system. It needs the contest among parties who are, to some degree, principled. And what's happening with what Trump is doing to the GOP is actually eviscerating it of its principles around both morality and around free trade. And that's what Bob Corker was going livid about, saying, don't poke the bear. Just, you know, your viewers should, you know, just Google Corker, don't poke the bear, and see the commentary that's happening. Because what that is evidencing is complete cowardice on the part of the GOP to challenge their president when they know he's wrong.
When we come back, there's this other thing called an investigation going on. We'll see what the professor's thought is on that. Stay with us. That guy's Bob Mueller. By the way, economic advisor Peter Navarro was the guy that said there was a special place in hell for Justin Trudeau. Just as we began the production of the show today, Michael Cohen reportedly, according to ABC News, has disposed of or lost one of his attorneys. I'm not sure how that's going to go. And reportedly, he feels like he's soon to be indicted, which tells me that he's fighting. He's fighting. He's not complying with the special prosecutor if he fears indictment or expects indictment, because indictment wouldn't be necessary if there was cooperation. Of course, Paul Manafort is about to end up in jail any minute now, and I think he too is counting on a pardon. This is like a pardon prayer going on here right now. Back page in the sociological minds of Americans right now, this Mueller investigation, or will that pop back up as the North Korean thing settles in a little bit?
The North Korean thing, quote unquote, has been a good distraction from this.
An important one.
An important one, and it is a slight glimmer.
We all have to compartmentalize, right? I mean, nuclear issues are nuclear issues, no matter how
That's right.
crazy things are back at home.
But while the Russia investigation is off the front pages, Mueller hasn't stopped. There are 20 people now indicted. This is a serious...
Half of whom are Russians, but,
This is a serious criminal investigation. And one of the things that's, I do know people who self-identify as witches, and so therefore I apologize for what I'm about to say, that apparently, according to what Donald Trump says, calling that this is a witch trial, there are many witches now on trial. And they are going to prison, especially if one of them is Paul Manafort, because Paul Manafort is as corrupt as one could imagine. And the idea that somehow there is no collusion when he was the campaign manager, and now we know who his Russian, principal A was, because in fact this guy was training at Russian intelligence headquarters.
So you've been writing about this. I got a minute. Go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the last show, you invited me to offer a theory of all of this stuff, and you caught me completely flat-footed because you messed up my thesis about survival. I've given up on the genre. I don't think I can do a theory of Trump, but what I could do is a soap opera around Trump. And here's the premise, in case anybody wants to buy this.
Can you do this in a half a minute?
Crony capitalist president hails toothless agreement with heir to dynastic socialism as he evades super prosecutor in ever deeper conspiracies with big Kremlin brothers dupes. Meanwhile, his vile narcissism wrecks conservatism's principles of morality and trade. The only thing I'm worried about is that they will accuse me of plagiarizing reality.
And using many multi-syllabic words back to back to back to back. That was really good.
Academic audience.
Thank you, my friend. Final word and we come back. All righty, listen, coming up on the program tomorrow, we're going to check in with the CEO of Deepwater Wind. Everybody had their, panties in a bundle over the idea that we were going to put 5 turbines off Block Island. Well, if you didn't like those, you're not going to like these. Now, the promises are that electricity will come down for us. It didn't with the Block Island deal, but that was really kind of a trial run. Is this the wave of the future, and can we count on this really supplying the bulk of our energy, or electricity at least, in the near future? We'll talk about it tomorrow. And of course, we'll see you on the radio, hopefully talk to you on the radio at 3 until 6 on WPRO tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in to this original show. Bye.